All right, so we're going to talk about how to get rid of Canadian geese in your yard. Like the beginning, it had lakesaping. This doesn't just apply if you live by a lake. If you live by a pond or you just have a really big yard that has geese and you're tired of them, this will work great for you too. They start looking for this around February and March, so it's about now is when they're starting to look for the nest. They start mating around 2 to 3 years old, and they typically mate for life, which can be around 3 years. They usually only have about a 10-year lifespan. Many of you I've talked to said that they're already nesting, and they tend to lay those nests about 150 feet away from water. So geese obviously love water; they're always on water, and this doesn't deter from them building nests. So they want to have that easy water access. Females will lay 1 egg every day and a half, and they usually lay about 5 to 7 eggs, and that's usually their stopping point. The females will incubate for about 28 days. The 28 days is to satisfy her nesting need. So we'll talk a little bit later. If her nest is destroyed and she didn't reach that 28 days, she will most likely re-nest somewhere else and have to do the 28 days until she's satisfied. And March through April is typically their mating season, which then leads into their nesting season. Now we'll talk about feeding, because geese have to eat. Having access to food is important for nesting. Like all of us, we want easy access to food. Fertilized lawns, they love it, so that's why they tend to stay around. They also love that short vegetation, which is under that 6-inch mark, because that's usually they're taller than that vegetation, so they can still see around them, but they can still also eat it. Lagoons, waste grains, like our fields. So if you live next to a field that also has water access, you might see a lot of geese there because they want that easy access to those waste grains. And Kentucky bluegrass is another favorite snack of theirs. They want to stay, like I said, within walking distance, but they also want to be in an open space because they are a little bit of a scaredy cat. So they want to make sure that they can see predators all around them. So if they're in an enclosed space, they're most likely not going to stay there. So I like to think of a golf course that's very open. So public health and safety, obviously that's a main concern, probably number one concern for most of you here. Geese, like most animals, they poop, and they're going to poop in the water, which means our E. coli levels are going to go up, which is not good for us, not good for kids, grandkids, for your dogs, any animal you might have that's in the water. So we want to kind of steer them away from doing that. They do a lot of property and crop damage. Like I mentioned, they like those waste grains. So if you're by a field or if you have a little garden, they'll most likely go through it because they don't care about your planting or your landscape. They're gonna do what they want to do. Their noise, their honks are very, very annoying, and that can be a little bit of a concern, is having that noise that you don't necessarily want. Traffic hazard, because you don't want to hit these geese. And then again, just a divided public attitude. I've met people that love these geese, which I think that they're beautiful and they're fun creatures to watch, but I also wouldn't want them in my yard or in our lakes as much. So just kind of whatever your attitude towards them is. This is for geese management. So we have hunting, harassing, and habitat changes. We're not going to talk about a lot of hunting here in this one. If you're an avid hunter and you want to hunt these guys, feel free. It's on their DNR website. They have a whole list of requirements, permits, all of that you can look through. But we're going to focus on harassing and habitat changes, just for the sake of, in Warsaw, those are the most common geese management tools you'll be using. All right, so harassing. So I'm going to have you guys interact with me for a second. So has anybody tried harassing a geese before? Yeah, a couple of you. All right, so harassing geese is the most common type that people tend to go to. Unfortunately, this has to be done timely and very consistent, but you also have to make sure you're doing it unpredictable, because these birds, believe it or not, have very small heads, but they are very smart. So they will catch on if you coming out after work every day at 5 o'clock and you're trying to scare them away. After a while, they're not gonna care anymore because they're so used to it. So it has to be unpredictable. So different times of the day, different methods, different tactics. You just gotta confuse them a little bit. The appropriate time is usually mid-May to mid-summer. The time when you can't harass them is when they're molting because they can't fly away. This kind of becomes inhumane for them because they don't, believe it or not, they don't run very fast. So if you're harassing them with your dog with a noise machine, whatever, then they can't actually get away from that harassment. If you want to see results, it could take up to 2 weeks. And it's legal as long as the birds aren't harmed. So most common is when you have your dog on a leash and you're trying to get your dog to chase away the geese. That is great, good and dandy. But if your dog hurts the animals or if you yourself accidentally hurt them, then that's when it becomes illegal to do. This should be implemented as soon as you see geese on your lawn or wherever you're trying to get rid of them. Because if they are there for a while, they're going to say, hey, this is my habitat. I'm going to stay here whether you annoy me or not. So it just makes it a little bit harder. And because of that, this isn't a long-term solution. They're very stubborn birds, and they will come back even if it's not the same route of geese. More of them will still come back if you're in that basically sweet spot of where you're at. Feeding policies comes in with not having to harass. So there's intentional feeding and unintentional. Intentional is obviously, I'm sure all of you have heard giving bread to ducks, any of the waterfowl. Please don't do that. That's not good. Not just for the geese, but for any waterfowl. So bread for geese, or really any waterfowl, has no nutritional value whatsoever. And what happens if they fill up on bread is that they will eat all this bread that you're giving them because you think, hey, I'm feeding them, they're so pretty, they're so cute. But then they can't eat the grass or the other plants that they need to survive, and it can actually be detrimental to their health and their populations. Some unintentional feeding, they're scavengers, so your garbage, your pet food, if you have an animal outside, they'll come through, eat that. Another big one is bird feeders. I don't know about you guys, I love having bird feeders. We have some outside at the Lily Center. We love to see all of our birds out here. They're super pretty. But when you think about it, birds are super messy eaters, so they'll tend to drop some of the seeds that they don't eat on the ground. And that's kind of prime buffet, I should say, for the geese. And they'll come through, and that might be an attraction to them. All right, so now we'll switch over to habitat modification.
Question on
Yes, go for
about
it.
the bird feeders, once you're coming back to it.
Yes.
Are there types of bird food that you know of that they wouldn't be drawn to? 'Cause I love to do the bird feeders.
Yeah. No, they're not picky eaters. So whatever's on the ground, they're most likely gonna eat it.
Okay.
I think it more or less comes back to if you have a geese problem, maybe cleaning up what your birds happen to drop just to eliminate how much is on the ground.
Okay.
Yeah, because the more that's on the ground, obviously, the more they're gonna want to come back to. So
Okay.
as long as we're cleaning up, that might help you deter a little bit if you still want your bird feeders.
Okay.
No, good question. Okay, so we'll go to habitat modification, which is going more into my specialty with the native plants. So this is much more preferred, much more long-term. Not to mention, it's very pretty. So you'll incorporate those native plants, eliminate features that attract the geese, so those wide open spaces, the access to open water. We're blocking the line of sight for our predators, which means that they're not going to feel comfortable if they can't see all around them. And then you can also go into the side of using physical barriers, which would be fences. And there's a bunch of requirements on fence height and all of that you can get into if fences are your thing. But other than physical barriers, we have our vegetation barrier, which can be trees, shrubs, native plants. It has to be dense enough so geese can't easily walk through because they are stubborn and they don't care what your landscaping looks like. They will push through whatever you're put down. So this means that your plants can't be spaced out by a foot or whatever. It has to be close so that they don't want to walk through and can't walk through it. But this can mean that you're going to have a very attractive lawn or edge of your lake, wherever you're wanting to put these As a requirement, the plant should be at least 3 feet tall and roughly 20 to 30 feet wide wherever you're planting or landscaping. This just makes sure that the geese can't see over the plants and you have a wide enough area that might prevent them from walking through it. Now, this can be smaller. It doesn't have to be that 20 to 30 feet wide section because I know your yard is probably not going to be that big or you don't want your whole yard to be taken up by native plants. That's fine. It just has to make sure that it's dense enough that these geese aren't going to just plow through your landscaping and all the hard work you put into it. All right, so we can go into now egg oiling. So I have a couple of points on egg oiling. I also have a brochure up here that a couple of you picked up that goes more in depth with egg oiling. And if you are looking for permits and all of that for this, the DNR website is fantastic. They can walk you through it. They do a really great job of that. So for egg oiling, you do need a permit, which you can go to the DNR website for that. It's important to know that before you do any kind of nest or egg destruction, that you visit that site, you call somebody from the DNR so that you can have that permit because you will have to tell them what you're finding, where it's at, how old the eggs are, and all of that good and fun stuff. So to actually egg oil, this requires an egg test to see how old the egg is. Obviously, the closer the egg is to hatching, it becomes a little more inhumane to basically kill off the egg. So you want to test to see how old your egg is, and you're not allowed, like I said, to harm eggs when they're close to hatching because the little goslings will be very large and this becomes an ethical issue. So how you do this is you will want to take oil and you're going to actually oil the eggs and place them back in the nest at that early age. The reason for this is because the mother will come back to the nest, she'll sit on it for those 28 days, and it'll satisfy her nesting need. So she'll think, hey, I did a great job. She's going to sit there for 28 days and she'll get up and keep moving on while her eggs aren't actually going to hatch. So the oil actually covers up the pores in the egg, so it allows the goslings to stop growing, and it slowly kills the egg, but she still can sit on her nest, and she thinks she's doing a good job, but her eggs aren't actually going to do anything. Very good. All right, so we use the term lakesaping. It's inventive, so feel free to tell your friends about it, use it on your own, however you wish. So this essentially has 3 parts to it. So it creates that native plant riparian strip, whether you're by water or you're just at your house, or you don't have water but you still have geese. You can create that strip of plants or plants throughout your yard that helps to keep these geese from coming on your lawn. And then it can also increase pollinators and reduce lake pollution or pond pollution, wherever you might be. It can just add the extra layer of protection. All right, so native plants. So these are plants that are native to Indiana. They're naturally found in this area, if you didn't know what they were. They can prevent shoreline erosion, runoff. Obviously, our whole point of this talk is to discourage Canada geese. They increase those pollinators. Most common thing I hear from people when they're not wanting to do native plants is they're worried that snakes are going to be in their landscaping, which is a valid concern because if you're by your lake, you don't want snakes to be in your landscaping when you have kids, when you have grandkids, animals. So ironically, snakes are not going to be present in your native landscaping. For some reason, they don't really like native plants very much. So you don't have to worry if you're terrified of snakes. You can check that off your list. They won't be there. And this can also increase fish population and their size if you have those larger shrubs or trees, just from the extra shade because they love all of that shade. So while native plants are great, some people don't want them on their lake lawn or just in your lawn in general, which is totally fine. So a couple reasons are lake views. Okay, let's be honest, when you get a lake house or you're vacationing, you want to be able to see the lake and you want to have that amazing view, whether it's for the sunset, the sunrise, whatever it is. People want to see the lake from their house. If you have your native plants up front, you can trim them so they're not looking wild, they're not getting crazy, and you can still very well see your lake. Seawall erosion control, people want to just put that erosion, or they want to fix erosion through their seawall, which that is great. But this is more of a natural way to do that with your native plants. You want to match your neighbors. So your neighbors have this amazing house, this amazing lawn, and you want to look just like them. I promise you're just gonna look better when you have native plants, and you're helping the environment. So that's awesome. And then also that just the clean appearance of your lawn, just having the clean manicured lawn that everybody wants. Again, the native plants can be used to look manicured. Ours out here that we have around the Science Center, we love to have the wild look, but we also have to trim them back to make it look manicured. So there is a way to be able to do that, and it just comes down to trimming and being on top of your landscaping. All right, so it's up to you if you want to take a picture. We'll talk about other native plants, but these are just a couple plants, flowers, grasses, and shrubs that geese don't like. They tend to be larger, bushier. You have your flowers, so if you're worried about your native landscaping looking very green, you can have some lovely color. We have our blue flag iris, which is a beautiful blue-purple color, your cardinal flower and your royal catchfly that are a very beautiful red color. And then you have your common milkweed, your marigold, your Joe Pye weed. So it's really up to your preference on what you want your space to look like. If you're more of a grass person, you can have sedges, switchgrass, Indian grass, or if you want those classic shrub look, there's some shrubs that geese just don't. It gives you your scientific name. So if you're looking for plants, it gives you the scientific name of what that actual flower is, because there's many flowers that have the same name, but they might not be the same flower. So the scientific name is great. They have your common name, your quantity for the layout, which again, you can change depending on your preference. They have the color of what color your plant will be. So when you're getting it and you're like, man, this thing's green, I wanted a yellow flower, it'll tell you when it blooms. It'll be yellow or whatever color you were looking for. The spacing is important, so that'll kind of give you an idea of how big, bushy, small these plants will be. And the OC next to you, if you aren't aware, it means on center. So that's measuring the plant from the center of the plant to the center of the next plant. So that's how they're getting that measurement from there. And then it also gives you the height, so you can see how tall these plants will get to help you kind of plan out that a little bit better. We'll make a note that we need to make sure that plants, as far as Canadian geese control is concerned, that they're at least 3 feet tall, which some of these are, which is great. But if you want to mix in some of those taller plants in with this, that is great, and it'll help with the geese control, and it'll give you some layers to your landscaping. Perfect. So to go goose free, we're going to install those native plants. Yeah. All right. So to do that, we need to know a little bit more about our native plants. So a little bit about their growth rate. Native plants, they're similar to normal plants in a way, but they're not fully established until their second year. If you don't know anything about native plants, their roots are huge and they go down really far. And takes actually a couple years for roots to fully develop because they are so long. But after the second year, they're usually good to go. They're not going to go anywhere. Each year, your native plants will just continue to grow to fill in. And around the third year mark, like we noticed here at the Lily Center, you'll see your plants get that bushy, and they'll get bigger, they'll get fuller, and you'll see them fill in how you were planning to. I will also say that if your plants are not filling out and it's like, not how you want it to look, feel free to add another one. You can fill in those gaps with new native plants and they'll catch on just as nice. So they're pretty friendly in the fact that you can just plug in plants wherever you have holes. All right, so to install your native plants, this is pretty self-explanatory. If any of you are gardeners, which I know obviously I am because I do landscaping here, but if you're not, then this might be helpful. So first, you obviously want to find the plants you want. You want to make a list, make sure that they handle the soil conditions. So if you have super wet plant or super wet soil or super dry, might mean you have to water more or you don't have to water at all, which is even better. You want to create a planting plan. So this is me being extra, so you don't necessarily have to create a planting plan. I'm a planner. I love making lists, planning all that stuff out. But you can at least have a planting list and have a mental idea of where you want plants. Then you actually have to buy the plants to get them. Important when you're planting your native plants, you want to make sure that your roots are pointing down. Usually when you buy them, they come in a ball because they kind of tie up the roots. You want to cut that up and make sure that they're going down at a natural position when you put it in there. So you'll dig your hole, you put it in there. You want to make sure the top of your root ball is level with your surrounding soil, and you'll cover it up. A bunch of you might live on lakes, so you tend to have slopes in your yard. If that's the case, you want to build a berm to hold water in your plants while they're still getting acclimated to where you're planting them. Yeah.
Any type of mulch better than another?
I'm all for eco-friendly mulch and natural mulch. But no, as long as it's just that 3 inches of mulch,
Okay.
that's perfectly fine.
What about leaf debris? Can I just leave that down?
Yeah.
Would that can serve as my mulch?
Yeah, so if you're trimming, you can actually leave your trimmings on the ground if that's up to your preference, depending how you want your landscaping to look. But yeah, when you're trimming, you can leave it on the ground and that can act as your mulch as well. No, great question. How to plant those native plants, get rid of those pesky geese. If you are like, yeah, I love native plants, I love to get rid of geese, you can actually take native plant and goose reduction pledges, and they can be found on Clear Choice's Clean Water website, which is where all of these materials came from. We're fortunate enough that the DNR and the CCCW was willing to give us resources for this. So that's on their website. If you want to take that pledge, we highly